Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining for this webinar. This is part of the Microsoft User Group Utah. It's really part of the SharePoint Office 365 Utah User Group. But you can find us out on Meetup under Microsoft User Group Utah or hashtag MUGUT. It's such an ugly hashtag, but it's functional. And today we are joined by Melissa Hubbard. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
And just a quick thing about Melissa. So if you are in the Flow space, Microsoft Flow, then you are probably run into some of her articles or presentations. So she is an Office 365 and SharePoint consultant and specializes in Flow and SharePoint Designer and some of the other, say, workload automation capabilities out there. You write about a few different things besides just Flow, but a lot of Flow. And you are with, so what's your role, what's your title there at Withum?
I am a project manager, but I also do implementation as well.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining. And for those that are new to this, we are trying to, with the user group, trying to do more of these virtual presentations, these webinars. So please subscribe out. I'm hosting them under the Collab Talk, and so you can find them out. We've got some previous guests that the recordings are available out on YouTube, and there'll be some blog posts and other links that'll be shared if you're on one of the lists, whether the user group list or just outside of the area and a friend of Melissa or a fan of Flow and SharePoint and kind of all those good things. So we'll generally make those available through the various social channels. And so with that, I'm just going to turn the rest of the time over. We've got an hour. And once again, if you're just joining, if you do have questions, feel free to post them into the chat or in the Q&A module. I'm monitoring both of those things. And we'll try and get through as many of those, if you've got specific questions, as possible. Other than that, over to you, Melissa.
All right. Thank you, Christian. And hello, everybody. I am coming to you from the Washington, D.C. area. So it's about 2 o'clock here. And applaud to everybody who's taking an hour out of your day to learn about something new. I'm going to be talking about Microsoft Flow approvals, one of my favorite Flow topics today. Again, I'm Melissa Hubbard. I am very heavily on Twitter. I think I might be addicted to Twitter. So you can always ask me.
I will agree with that, yes. No.
Yeah, so you can always ask me questions. I post a lot of different Flow-related things on Twitter, as well as fun things as well. My email is there. I am a project manager at a company. We are based. Our main parent company is in New Jersey, but we have an office here in the DC area. We specialize in SharePoint and Microsoft technology. We've done a lot of intranets. We're gold partners. My role is as a project manager, but I also do a lot with Microsoft Teams implementations, as well as business process automation. I come from a government SharePoint consulting background, so I learned SharePoint in a very restricted environment, and it's very exciting now to be in the private sector where I'm getting to use cloud technology and really getting to see these great digital workplace tools really come to life and transform businesses and how they work. Let's see. Yes, I'm a Microsoft MVP. I recently became an MVP in 2 categories, and that was really exciting. So business solutions is really more my Flow side of things, and Office apps and services is Microsoft Teams. And I was an author of a book called Mastering Microsoft Teams with my friend Matthew Bailey, and it's on Amazon, so feel free to check it out. There's my plug there. Enough about me. Again, we're local in the area at Withum Digital. If you ever have any questions about business process automation, Teams, cloud deployments, feel free to get in touch with me. Those are our specialties. Today, I'm going to give you a brief overview of what Microsoft Flow is and what it does. I'm going to talk about Flow approvals specifically. I think approvals are really one of those things As far as business process automation opportunities, it's really easy for people to quickly see the value because there's so many things that we have to seek approval for in our day-to-day. And being able to automate those things instead of them sitting in email or Skype messages or Teams messages or somewhere out there in cyberspace where you don't know who's looked at it, who's reviewed it, who's approved it, being able to standardize and automate approval processes is just like a quick win, and it's just a great topic. So I'm going to give you some demos. We can do Q&A. I think, as Christian said, you can ask your questions in the chat, and he'll let me know when there's kind of some common questions, and then at the end, I would take questions, and if I can't answer everything, I will come back and provide answers to Christian. You can send them out in that email we talked about. My goal is if you've never built a flow, you'll build one after the session, or that you will learn something new and try a new flow. And as far as my questions, so Microsoft Flow, if you've not been following the newest Microsoft news at Inspire, there was a notice that came out about some licensing changes that impact Power Apps and Flow. There's still quite a bit of questions out there that community members have, and I've really not had a chance to exactly wrap my mind around these new licensing changes and how they're going to totally impact people. And I think there's still just some unanswered questions in general from Microsoft. So if we could try to steer clear from those questions, I think that would be good, because I would hate to tell you the wrong thing as far as this. So if you've got burning licensing questions, I'm sorry, this is not the webinar, but if you want to email me separately, I can try my best to find the answers. Fair enough? Okay. So what is Microsoft Flow? I started using Flow when it was very first released in preview because I was using a lot of SharePoint Designer workflows, and the message I got was, hey, SharePoint Designer workflows are going away. You have to use this thing called Flow. It's going to be replacing SharePoint Designer workflows. And I really like building workflows. I like the logic. I like watching an automation process and building them, and it was fun. And so I've watched this product grow since it very first came out, and it's just grown into something so much bigger, where it's now definitely an enterprise solution for business process automation. It has not replaced SharePoint Designer workflows yet, obviously, but that is coming in the future. So the idea behind Flow is to provide user-friendly solutions for people who are not developers. However, there is some aspects of Flow that, in my mind, still require a lot of development skill sets. So it kind of provides a little bit of everything depending on what business needs you're trying to meet. But there's plenty you can do as someone who is not a developer. You can use the UI and create things without using code. It's a streamlined version of Azure Logic Apps, if you know what that is. So sometimes you'll often, these products are very closely related with one another. The JSON code that is underneath your flow, it's the same as Azure Logic Apps, and you can actually decide that a flow has become too complex and have it, quote unquote, grow up to be an Azure Logic App. So just know that those products are closely related, but Flow is more for the citizen integrator, where Azure Logic Apps is more for your IT pro / developers. One cool thing about Flow is it's not just for your SharePoint content. You can connect with a lot of other services. You can connect with almost all of the other Office 365 applications, as well as other third-party products. And a fun fact is that although you will see Flow when you press your waffle in Office 365, in terms of Microsoft and how products are aligned with one another, Flow really doesn't live with Office 365. It lives under the Power Platform, which is Dynamics, Power BI, Power Apps. and then Flow. So a lot of people ask questions about why things aren't the same as they were in Designer, or we need this and that for SharePoint, or things just maybe some of the verbiage in Flow doesn't always make sense for SharePoint. It's being shared with other products. So just know that it's not just SharePoint. That's about all I have to say about that. So you can build your business process automation solutions from scratch, or there's plenty of templates you can use. So there was, I guess, what you would call templates in SharePoint Designer workflows, but I never really liked using those. But with the templates in Flow, they're super easy to set up and get started. There's a ton of them. So if you're going to build your first flow and you want to just check things out using a template, it might be a good idea. So then you can create it quickly. And another point to make with Flow is that when it first was released, I would say that you would mostly only be using this for your personal automation, meaning this wasn't for your whole team. It was more like, oh, if I get an email that is from a person in this group, then I want to post to the SharePoint list or something like that. It was more towards the individual rather than an enterprise business solution. But now Flow has like grown up so much, and you can do so much with the administration and things like that, that you can really bring this to an enterprise-wide level. But in the past with Designer, you really weren't creating Designer workflows just for your own personal productivity usage. It was for the enterprise or for that site. All right. Oh, another really great thing about Flow that's different that you should know about is that it's mobile. So you can track, manage, and create your flows right from the Flow mobile app. When I was first learning Flow, I had a really long commute, and I would carpool in Washington, D.C. And I created a lot of my first flows right from my mobile device. And another thing is you can create buttons in Flow that you will use from your mobile device, and you can press your button and have it kind of manually start a workflow process. So just things to be aware about. Let me keep going here. Work less, do more is the motto. Automate things, move your content, those repeatable tasks that you spend a lot of time on that you would rather be doing something else. These are candidates for Flow. Here's some of the main use cases. Getting notifications about things, copying files, moving files, collecting data, moving data, automating approvals. There's a community member named Louise Fries that has created this Flow kind of sticker, and it's a bottle of glue, and it's what holds your data together. So when you think about Office 365 and where we've gone in our modern workplace, we've got a bunch of different applications. So we have Planner, we've got Power BI, we have Power Apps, we have SharePoint, we have Yammer. So we've got all these different applications, and Flow is really a way to sync your data together. You can move data. It's really that glue, that connection where you can be moving things around, since you can connect to all of these services. And again, I touched upon this, but where it fits in the Microsoft scheme of things is in the Power Platform. And so that's with Power BI, Power Apps, and Flow. And all of these use a common data service, which you don't have to use these products, but it's a way to keep your data for your enterprise, have your single source of data. Some people are replacing SQL Server with the common data service, and they all use these. And for certain solutions, when you get more and more advanced with Flow, you have to have the common data service with that. But we're not going to talk about those things today. And yes, you can use Flow with your on-premises data gateway, on-prem data gateway. You
I believe it's on-premise.
on-premise, yes. All I know is that I'm not going to say on-premise because
on-prem. That's the easy.
On-prem. Yes. So Flow is a cloud technology. Your data will still be moved through the cloud through using Flow, but you can connect with your on-prem SharePoint environment. And you know what? I have another slide about that, so I won't go to it now. Components of a flow. So these are really just components of a workflow, adding connectors. So when you think about triggers, conditions, and actions, this is where you get into the logic of your business process automation. What is going to start the process? What is it going to be? Adding a new SharePoint item? Is it going to be somebody sending a message? Is it? But you can even think bigger. Someone posting a tweet. That could be your trigger. It can be from any of the services that Flow connects with. So there's a ton of different triggers. But when, the most common ones since this is a SharePoint user group, adding a new item, editing an item, that would be your trigger. The different thing about Flow though is that you can also trigger a flow based on where you are. Like a geofence, you can do a location trigger. It's actually not working the greatest right now. It's in preview, but you can have a flow trigger when you step into a certain region. Like I tested it out. I made a whole flow for a wine tour I was going on, and I wanted it to trigger every time I got to a different winery, and then I had it where I was going to enter in what wines I tried, and it was going to send me a list. So that was the test I did. But there's other actually really practical use cases for it. However, it's in preview. You can trigger manually really easily in Flow, whereas in SharePoint Designer, it really wasn't meant for that. I mean, there was that manual trigger, but it was really more for testing and things. So it doesn't have to be an event happening. You can be manually triggering flows. And you can also trigger flows on a schedule. So no need for a timer job. You can set flows to run on a schedule by the minute, by the day, by the hour, every 2 hours, every 4 days. You can set the schedule. So that's really nice. All right, so that's triggers. Your conditions are when should this happen? So if this, then that. If I've added an item and the status field is ready for review, then do something. So you don't have to have conditions in your flow. You can just trigger it and then have it do something. But if there's any logic behind it, so if something's true, this should happen. If something's not true, this should happen, etc. You can add your conditions. And actions are what is the flow doing, but what are you trying to accomplish? And there can be several actions in your flow. Looking at connectors though, this is where we bring in that concept of it's not just SharePoint. You can connect to a ton of different services. You have to actually have that service. You're going to have to log in. For the more technical people, it's a proxy or wrapper around an API that allows the underlying service to talk to Flow. You can create custom APIs, so you can do that. Again, you can connect to on-prem systems, and that's not just SharePoint on-prem, it's also SQL Server on-prem. I think those are the two that come to mind though. People ask questions of when you're creating and building your flows, whose account are you using? Should people use their own accounts? Should we use admin accounts? And the answer is that it depends. But in some instances, if it is easier to use a service account, but I would follow whatever rules and compliance things you have set up within your organization on how you manage service accounts and follow those same procedures for Flow. And if your password expires, yes, it will stop your flow and you're going to have to reconnect it, and you'll get a notification saying that your connection is broken. So those are just a few things to know about connectors. And I like to for SharePoint focused groups, really do the comparison with Designer, because I think people still have it in their mind that Flow is just this Designer replacement. And yes, it is, eventually going to replace Designer, but it's also a lot more than that, because again, this is not just a SharePoint tool. This is a Dynamics tool, and it is an Office 365 tool. It's a way to connect data from a lot of different services. But if you want to just kind of apples for oranges, take a look at them. For SharePoint Designer, we really looked at automation of enterprise business processes. Flow is also for the enterprise, but it's also for individual business processes. One really great benefit of Flows, I remember doing SharePoint Designer workflows, and I'm really, I'm a power user, I'm not a developer. And I remember seeing the need when different organizations had a lot of different SharePoint site collections. I really needed to move data between the site collections, and just, simply using SharePoint Designer, that wasn't possible. I know there was ways around it, but it required more of a developer skill set. With Flow, it's really easy. You just create a connection with different site collections, and you can move data between the different site collections. So it's really one. If you're trying to decide, like if you're trying to decide for a new workflow, should I use Designer or should I use Flow, and you have a need to move between site collections, then you can use Flow. Let's see. Another nice thing about Flow that I think is different is that you can easily export them and import them into different environments, whereas SharePoint Designer workflows were a bit hard to package and reuse. Might be an understatement. I remember creating these same Designer workflows quite a few times because you couldn't really package them up and reuse them very well. Again, you can run flows on a schedule. You would have to create a timer job or something custom with SharePoint Designer to do that. With Designer, it was free and it came with SharePoint, and you got an unlimited amount of workflows. That's not really the case with Flow. There's a free version, but it's definitely not where you would use that for your enterprise. It's really just for your individual automation use. I don't even think you get the admin center capabilities. There's a lot of limitations with the free version. You get it with Office 365. So if you have an Office 365 like E3 license, and you get Flow with it. But again, there's still some limitations with that, and there's some things being added as premium connectors. I should have mentioned that when we were on the connector slide, but there's some premium connectors where you need a higher license for Flow. And again, there's some changes coming with licensing, but I can't avoid these topics totally. Benefits. Really saving time and effort is the point of this, and being more efficient and having less errors in your processes, especially when we think about approvals. Having things standardized, having things all in one place where everyone can see what has been approved or what's not approved, and not be searching and wasting time trying to search through emails, who's looked at this and who hasn't, and is it approved or is it not. Being able to have your citizen developers create automation solutions is great. Not having to wait on developers to create things for you. It really saves money at the end of the day to have people being able to create things that they need for their team. Connecting with SharePoint on-prem, the mobile features are really a huge benefit, especially for our society being on the go so often. Being able to create and manage your flows on the go is definitely a benefit. All right. So going into approvals a bit, there is integration with modern SharePoint lists and libraries. So there's some flows that are right out of the box in the modern experience. This is not the case for classic lists and libraries, but for modern lists and libraries. So you can create flows right from your list or library, and I'm going to show you this in a minute. You can run based on trigger, or you can run on a selected item. This is what I was talking about when I say you can easily run a flow manually. In SharePoint, you can literally click the item and then you get this drop down, and you can request sign off, or if you have any other flows that you want to run, they will show up here if they're connected with that list or library. So you get a launch panel that allows users to actually enter information at the runtime. So if I selected this item and then I selected a flow, even if I didn't have information in a field in the SharePoint item, I could have a panel there where I could type in something like some notes that I want included, and then those could be used to send in an email or to post to Teams or post to Yammer, things like that. The request, sign off, and send a reminder are two of the flows that are right out of the box and really useful. I'm going to go ahead and just show them right now, and this might be a good time for questions if there's any, Christian.
Yeah, there's a couple. One, I was actually just trying to find, I remember reading about this a few months ago about there's been multiple requests and user voice for a connector to Exchange server. I don't know if you know have an update on that. I just know that there's at least 2 user voice requests that are out there, but I don't see an update.
No, I haven't heard anything. I don't have any inside knowledge on that one. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so the question Lee's asking is, will a data gateway allow me to use Exchange as a connector?
Probably, if it's not a...
Yeah, most of the feedback that I see out there, people are saying, look, there's multiple MVPs that are out on the tech community that are saying, look, there's methods where you can, one, the advice is migrate everything over to the cloud. That's kind of the default answer to upgrade that stuff. And obviously there's going to be organizations that have business requirements to keep things there. And so there are a couple other examples. I've not run through them. I've not, but one in particular was like migrate, be like a single, over there's, I'm looking for the link again. I think it was in Max Sprit who actually had one option, but I'll try and find that link. I remember reading about this. This is like back in April. I'll chase it down. The other question that earlier was, and I did a partial answer, was around the GCC. You working within that space, want to know if there are any other limitations of flow within the GCC. And I provided a link over to the, kind of the page for Microsoft Flow on the GCC for the latest update.
The main one I've heard is that you can only connect with Office 365 applications, I believe. But to be honest, I'm not working in the GCC space really right now, and I've not had access to a GCC tenant with Flow. So I'm kind of limited to just documentation that's out there as well. So
yeah, and I think that page is, that's the up-to-date, the link that I provided in my answer. Yeah. You can find that in the answers. I just bookmark that and check back. The third question out there from Ben says, we're using service accounts for our flows and recently had an error happen to multiple flows regarding token expiration with that service account. Do you have any recommended best practices to avoid that in the future?
So I would say having it in your process where you update those, maybe just setting a reminder. I know I've heard that complaint before, and it's kind of just making sure that you go in and update them before they error out in your flows. Sorry, that's probably not. I don't know any automated ways. There might be something like that. There is an admin connector, and maybe I can look and see if there's anything. I can get back to you if I can come up with a better answer, but there's not one that I know of off the top of my head. How about that?
Okay. And that's it for now. Any other questions? Just keep posting them to the Q&A module, and we'll try and get to them.
All right, cool. Okay, so it's 2:30, so that's pretty good timing for where I'm at. All right, I'm going to just quickly show you some built-in flows in a in a list. I'm going to pick a random one. And then, actually, I'll show you a library. Oh, not that one. Sorry, my mouse is dead, so I'm using my touchpad. Okay, so this is a modern SharePoint library. You can see here I have a flow dropdown. I could create a flow from here and I could see my flows. So this see your flows is kind of misleading because this is just going to show me all my flows. This is not going to show me just my flows for this library. And in fact, I find that to be a pretty missing admin feature with Flow, is that you can't really just search your flows or see your flows by SharePoint list or library the way you could with Designer. But this set a reminder. If you have any date field in your list or library, you can automatically set up reminders. So this is pretty new, and the last time I tried it, it was broken. But I'm going to see if it's working right now. Okay, so cool. So you can any date field you can choose, and if I had more, it would show them there in that drop down. So I could get an email reminder however many days in advance from that date. So that's kind of cool, because that would have required, someone creating a Designer workflow for that before. So I find that really useful, and I don't think a lot of people know that's out there yet. Definitely test it, because again, it's pretty new, and I hate to admit it, but sometimes these things just take a little while, or they're in preview and they don't work 100%, but they're getting so much better. So if I select an item here, I can request sign off. And so this is a built-in flow where if you have any item or document and you just want to quickly send it to someone for them to review it, you don't want to have to set up a whole approval flow and have them change a property in here and have it kick it off like that. You can select an item and then hit request sign off. And there we go. And then it just takes someone who's a list owner or library owner to create the flow. Of course, you're going to say something went wrong. Try one more time. Again, I'm not sure, these sometimes just refresh here. One more time. Okay, so now it doesn't want me to create it. But anyway, this is what the user will see when it's working correctly, is they can choose any approver they want, and then write a message and then run the flow. And basically that'll send a flow approval to whoever they've decided, and then that person can approve or reject it. And it'll show in this review status field that'll get automatically added to your list. So I just wanted to show you those, and I'm going to quickly go back to my slide deck and talk about approvals a little more, and then we're going to go back and just do some more demos. Okay, so the approval features in Flow, as I've said, is one of my favorite things. You can manage the approval of documents and processes across several services. What this means is you could have several different SharePoint lists or libraries that you have approval processes running on. Or you could even have approval processes for maybe your social media, as an example. When someone adds a new social media message, send an approval, something like that. I'm going to show an example of a use case for that. But you can have all these different approval processes with different services, and it comes together for you in one place in your Flow Approval Center. They can be customized, so they can be sequential or parallel. You can configure whether everyone has to approve or just one person from your list of approvers. One thing is you can't use a SharePoint group as your approver group. You have to enter in people into the approver assigned to field individually, which I don't like. But you can also send approvals to someone else if you choose to, and I'll show you that too. But there's different ways you can approve, which is really nice because you don't have to go to the approval center. You can also approve from your mobile device if you've got the Flow app on your phone. You can also approve from email. And again, you can reassign, and you can also email the requester. So actually a lot of people complain about the reassign feature, and there's no way to turn that off yet, at least. So I could get an approval and not know what to do with it, and I could reassign it to whoever else in my organization that I wanted. One thing I want to note that I don't have in my slide deck, and it's really new, but you can now add guests to the approvers. This is in preview. So I just want to mention that. That's really new, that you can add people who are guests in as approvers. So there's a lot of approval templates, which again are pre-made approval flows. Really easy to configure. It's really just a matter of selecting the template and then entering in your connection. So basically connecting your account, authorizing the connection. You can make modifications to the templates, so you can add steps or not. You can delete things out of them as well. You cannot tailor the template gallery for your organization. So all the templates that you will see in Flow are the same templates that everybody sees. Granted, sometimes new templates hit different tenants and different geolocations first, but for the most part, you'll see the same exact thing in the templates as everyone else. You can't delete any of them. There's no way to just show only your organizational templates. One idea that I had was, since you can export your flows, you can export them into zip files. So one way around this is you could create a document library in SharePoint with some metadata, and you could actually store your zip files of your flows and share that library with your different flow makers and give some description of what the flow does, and then they could import it themselves. So that's one idea. It's not perfect, but also if you have a flow that is really useful, you can request to have it added to the template gallery as well. And here's a snapshot of the approval center, which I'll be showing, but this is where you can receive or view all of your approvals you have waiting on you that you've received, and the ones that you've sent, ones that you've initiated. And you can view all of your approval history. I think it's from the beginning of time, because I've got some super old ones that are in there, and I've not had anyone tell me anything different of like when those will expire or be taken out of your flow history. I would assume that as Flow becomes more and more heavily used throughout enterprises, the Flow history is going to be limited. But for now, you can see all your approval history. So let me just open up Flow now and stop talking so much here. So flow.microsoft.com is one way to get to Flow, or you can go through Office 365, or you can use your mobile app on your phone. So here I am at kind of the home page of Flow, and it'll show you actually right here things you have pending, and here's your template collections. So they've kind of grouped them by work functions to give people ideas. So if you're trying to get your organization to adopt flows, if you have a sales team or human resources or marketing, you could take a look at these templates and see if anyone would benefit from them. Approvals, when I click here, here's the approval center. So here's things I have received that are waiting on me. So ones that I've sent, and my approval history. So the day it was received and completed, and the outcome. And now I'm going to show you my flows. So here's a list of all of the flows that I have access to. One thing is there's a concept of making a flow a team flow. So those you can see here. And that means that you've shared it with someone else. It is best practice. This is just kind of my demo tenant for myself. But if you're creating business process automation solutions for your enterprise, you would definitely want to have more than one flow owner. So then you would have these team flows, and if one person goes away or is gone or leaves the organization, you've still got another flow owner. If you don't do that and your flow owner leaves, you have to have someone who is a flow administrator, meaning they have to have a higher license than what you get with Office 365, and then they can take care of it and assign a new flow owner from there. But you know, that's not best case. All right, so I'm going to take a look at a couple approval flows. This is a parallel approval. So I didn't really explain the difference between parallel and sequential approvals. Apologize for that. Parallel approval means that, let me open it up, means that you can have more than one branches of approvers working at the same time in parallel. So here I have a flow trigger of when an item is created in SharePoint, in a SharePoint list. And then it's sending out an approval at the same time to the program manager and the manager. And then I have a condition. So that condition on each of these branches is based on whether they've approved or rejected. One little tip, when I was first using flow approvals, I wanted to use the I wanted to use the value approved or rejected, but it's approve or reject, or it's not going to work. So just know that and save yourself a headache. So here, if it is not equal to approve, then it sends this rejection and updates the item and sends an email. So it will make you, on these required fields, select the value. You select a value through dynamic content. And this just means that because this is running on the trigger of the item being created, it's going to give me these values that I can then use throughout the flow. And so if you've got a required field, it just makes you pop them in there. And then here, I have this this field that I'm, for program manager review, I'm entering in it as rejected. And then since you can have more than one approver, I'm filling in the approver's name. But let's take a better look at this. So here's an approval action. So approval type, first to respond, everyone must approve. And see, this is a premium feature. If I was to select one of these, I would need to have a different license than what is standard with Office 365. But I could have to wait for all responses or just wait for one response, and that's with custom. So that means not just approve or reject, but I could have it do something different if someone says ready for review, needs more information, approved. You can create custom responses. So you can add a link to your item, and you can enable the notifications. And that has to do with if you're using, like, you would get a notification on your mobile phone, and the requester. So if you want this to generate on behalf of someone else, you can use their email there. So the email of the person generating the request. And notice I have to type in these emails and assign to, not the greatest, but that's how it works. So you're typing in, I'm not sure if there's a limit on how many people you can have these in assigned to. I've not hit it yet, but there probably is.
Hey, Melissa, quick question. For that premium license, Chris is asking, is that just for the person creating the flow?
Is that just for the person creating the flow? It would be anyone taking an action on the approval. So no, it wouldn't just be the person creating the flow. That's my understanding. Okay, so I've got two parallel branches. This one's here, the same. It's just a different, a manager and program manager, but they're both going at the same time with the same conditions, and they're both updating the item. So let me go to that list and let's run it. Human resources, leave requests, travel requests, no. Oh, sorry, I got things in my way here. There we go. So leave request is a common, hold on, let me double check something. Yes, okay. I say leave request is one of the most common approval scenarios. I mean, depending on how large an organization is, there might be some system specifically for handling travel and leave and PTO requests. Others have to come up with their own enterprise solution using tools they have. So sometimes, it just depends on the organization, but you can use Flow and your Office 365 tools to create different leave request solutions. This is one using SharePoint, but there's other tools available, and you could still probably connect Flow to do the automation piece of it. But where you want to store your data about your leave requests is up to you. But here's one with just a calendar, SharePoint calendar. Nothing too fancy. And so I'll just use myself. Oops. What is my account? There we go. So I'm going to go on vacation. Comments. Need these days off. So the next step I would probably do to make this an enterprise solution is make this a Power App and hide these fields and have them only be visible after their approval happened. But for now, just so you see it in the form, this is a manager review field with these choices, pending, approve, and reject. And then this is where it's going to fill in who was the manager, because there could be a couple people in that are going to be sent this approval, depending on how many people you've entered in your flow. And same thing here. So this should trigger it by me adding a new item. If we go to your flow, you can kind of watch your progress. Let's see. So on my phone, I just got the approval, but you'll see in your approval history, it's running right now and it started. So that's a good sign. And I'm going to go to my approvals. And here it was 22 seconds ago. And so I could approve here, but I also want to show you my Outlook email because you could do it from there too. So here it is. And I could also do this from the app on my phone. Come on. Oops. Come on. All right, well, I'm not going to make you sit here and watch this spin. I'll leave this and come back. So I can add a comment. But mind you, so this comment will be, associated with this approval. But unless I specifically set something up to take this comment and move it somewhere else, probably nobody's going to really see it. Like, I can add a comment and then create an action to send an email and then use whatever is in this comment. Or I could add this comment to that SharePoint list item in a comments field. But just know that just because you're running this flow on a SharePoint item, this isn't going to automatically be written into that SharePoint item. And again, like I had to, even for the outcome, you've got to add that you have to update the item with this information. So approve, have fun. Let me just see if oh, there we go. So this is what it looks like when you get the email, and right from your email, you can approve or reject with a link to the item. So kind of nice. It saves time. And let me go to my SharePoint list, not this one. Let me not accidentally click stop sharing again. Let's see if it updated my item. Yeah, so it updated for the program manager review. It didn't update for the other branch because I've only approved it once. So in real life, this would be 2 different people, and it would be updating the item based on the choice of both of the different approvers in the 2 branches. So let me quickly show another example of a sequential flow. So here's the social media approval example. I wanted to show something a little bit outside of SharePoint, and since I'm addicted to Twitter, guess what I'm going to use? So here, when an item is created in SharePoint, start an approval, and if it is approved, then update the item and send it to the next level approval, because a sequential approval means there's a couple different approvals that will happen one after another. One thing to note is that Flow has really no out-of-the-box state machine capabilities, meaning the sending back and having things run based on the state or the status it's not there. It's there's workarounds, I would say. So just know that. So this is sending it to a second level of approval in the sequence. And then if it's approved, it's updating the item to say that it's approved, or if it's not, then it's updating it to say it was not approved. See? And then at the end, it's posting the message to Twitter that I wrote in a list item. The use case I see for this is in busy marketing departments. It can be really crucial what you're saying, and I mean, if depending on how many followers you have and what your messaging is, there might be more than one person you want to take a look at these messages before you have your intern or whoever it is running your Twitter account post something that could be derogatory, or it could just not be on message. But you also, things move quickly in social media, and you need to make sure that that you're not waiting on people to get a message out. It could be pretty crucial that you need to stay, you have to get this stuff done timely. So being able to quickly enter a message into a list item and then have it sent out for approvals and then automatically post, it could save quite a bit of time and save some sort of embarrassment or whatever. So let me go to that list. Sorry, I just can't see these tabs because this is in the way. Okay, so just a simple list. One thing to note, if you're familiar with Twitter, you can do hashtags, but you can't @mention someone. It won't work. It's Twitter's way of stopping us from spamming people. So that's by design. It's not really a flow problem. It's a rule for Twitter. So I'm going to add and here, just the approval decisions from the two different levels of approval, the marketing manager and communications manager people I made up. So I'm going to say, thank you for having me. This is the right hashtag, isn't it? UT Spug, Christian?
Mug UT. Yeah,
Mug UT.
Yeah, that's it. MUGUT.
Okay.
Both of those are good. Now,
Kind of funny. Our Flow user group didn't know what to call our SharePoint because we're a Flow user group, so someone had suggested Fug and Chug. There's a fun fact for you. That's what Mug is.
Yeah, I wouldn't wear that one on a t-shirt, but yeah.
Okay, so there's my little test message. I'm triggering. Three new messages. Okay, so I got a message. Let me refresh here. Actually, you know what? My email's too slow and I'm running out of time, so I'm going to go to my approvals here. So, social media message for my review, and I'll approve. And then I'll get another one because the next step would be to send it to someone else, and I'm both people. So, got another one. There we go. You know what? I'll go on my phone and prove this one. Oh, there we go. Okay, so let's see if my tweet posted. This is my, yeah, there we go. Thank you for having me. Posted with the hashtag. And my item has updated. Since there's only 3 minutes left, let me stop here, go back to my deck. Let me know if there's any questions that I can answer in 3 minutes.
You've got one more question here. Dale's asking that he's noticed that there's an 8 nested conditions limit, and have you dealt with that or have any recommendations?
Then sometimes it makes sense to break your flow up. You can have one flow start another flow when one is done. The only problem with that is that it requires an HTTP call, which is also, I believe, a premium action. But that's one thing I've heard is people breaking up their flows to get around that.
And that's you commented, like you gave the example of Planner and having the project management background and not being able to automate within a single flow around a state change, but you can create multiple flows.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, I haven't had it. I've still been able to get a lot of value without having the state machine piece of it. When something's finished, like sometimes I've been on projects where before marking an item complete, you wanted to have someone else on your team look at it. So once you mark it to complete, kind of send an approval, things like that. But having things happen based on the status using flows in a state machine, no, I can't. There's probably workaround. There's so many workarounds you can do with flow. That's one of the dangers of reading the blogs sometimes is that it's possible, but what risks do you want to take or how much time do you want to spend on doing it is the other question you need to think about.
Well, yeah, with like anything, I mean, you need to look at what are you really trying to accomplish? Is it more efficient and effective just to run a report and manually, scan that on a daily or weekly basis than to have some of that automation? It's just,
yeah.
You always ask that question. It's not just, can we build it? It's like, should we in this case?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I know we're at the end. If there's there don't seem to be any other questions here. Any final questions from Melissa before we wrap? If not, really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you so much. And if anyone thinks of anything after, feel free to email me. Also, another thing is that I'm willing to offer my approval flows that I showed as an example as a zip file where people could take them and import them into their own environments just to get a feel for it and use it as an example. And if you want that, then feel free to email me and I'll send it your way.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And for everybody that joined, thanks for attending this. And for those that are in the region and not yet subscribed, as just definitely sign up out on Meetup for the Microsoft User Group Utah. And we've got both the MUGUT is not just about SharePoint and Office 365. It's kind of the entire Microsoft stack. So it's a kind of a centralized roll-up of multiple meetups and user groups. So if you register for MUGUT, then you should then hear about a number of other events. Like we just had our SQL Saturday last weekend. We've got SharePoint Saturday, which we're actually rebranding. It'll be 365 Friday happening the first weekend of February. And so, yes, and on a Friday, not a Saturday.
Whoa.
A lot of stuff that you can find out about by signing up in the MUGUT and get those notifications and for webinars like this. So, well, thanks a lot, Melissa, for your time today. And thanks, everybody, for joining us.
All right. Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks.